Okay, so shall we make a start? Yes. Okay, I'm just going to welcome you all. My name is Maria Arce. I am the head of CREL, the Center for Research and Enterprise in Language, and I'm going to leave the floor to my colleague Anna, who has prepared this event. But I wanted to say hello very warmly to Inés Miller, Professor Inés Miller, because she was also here in 2019 when the center had its first week. I think it was in our beginnings. So it's a very dear colleague that we love having around. So thank you very much for making it here again.
Thank you.
And welcome. And Anna, all is yours.
Yes. Hello, everyone. And as we are in hybrid mode, so thank you for being here. You as a live audience and you online. So, and also I want to thank Maria and Nancy for organizing and also for assisting. Nancy assist us with the show. My name is Anna Costantino and I'm a lecturer here. And my role, Maria, is to introduce Dr. Inés Miller, and she will share with us an understanding of ethics in teacher education and more specific why ethics matters. The field of expertise Inés is language teacher education, but I'm sure that our understanding and what she's going to tell us, share with us, is relevant to teacher education in general. Inés, Dr. Inés Miller is an associate professor in the Dipartimento de Letras at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, PUC. She teaches English phonology, the spoken discourse, applied linguistics, foreign language pedagogy and practice at undergraduate and postgraduate level. She also Inés has given a talk for our MATs students last year. Inés has been actively involved in development and dissemination of exploratory practice, which is a modality of practitioner research with a view towards achieving sustainable, and I want to underscore sustainable professional development. Inés also is a member of the Rio de Janeiro Exploratory Practice group. And indeed, Inés in the early 90s was very active in facilitating and being part of this beautiful encounter between grass language pedagogy theory applied linguistics. And out of this conversation, out of this encounter, that exploratory practice was generated and also as part of the, which is International Association of Applied Linguistics, Inés is one of the conveners of the research network called Fully Inclusive Practitioner Research. We call it from the UK, US, and Japan. Now, without further ado, I want to leave the floor. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Hello, and very nice of you to be here. I would also like to say I need to start by thanking CREL for inviting me, for having me, for saying your kind words, Maria, and Anna for all the organizing and getting me here and so on. I will be sharing, as Anna said most of the introduction really, because I was going to say many of these things, but I would like to point at the fact, as she said, that I work at PUC-Rio, which is the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, but I'm here also funded and grant the that is up there, the Capi Springs, which is an internationalization project from the government. And we have a project, Adriana Nobriga, who's online, and me. We have a project which is related to the work we do with ILA, which is it's towards an inclusive paradigm in applied linguistics. The other thing I need to say, to make quite clear, is that the ideas that I will be sharing with you today are not only mine, as I also said. We are a group, a huge group in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, at what we call the Rio Exploratory Practice Group, which in a way started with Dick Wright's work in Rio de Janeiro. So we are also connected very, very closely to the UK people, where Dick Wright, former Lancaster University, retired from Lancaster University, Asia Slimani Rose from Regents, Anna from Greenwich, who was there at NILA and enjoyed being part of the group, Judith Hanks from Leeds, and also, as Anna mentioned, as a co-convener of the ILA FIPR, the Fully Inclusive Practitioner Research Group, with people with Corey Crane from the USA and Yoshi Kato from Japan, and many more. Within the Rio Exploratory Practice Group, I should highlight, we have not only teachers, professors, but most importantly, students, learners, undergraduate, graduate, school children, as members of the group. So, as you can see here, and you probably read in the abstract in this talk today, I will draw on the ethical issues. I will try to point out the ethical issues that arise from my experience as a practitioner researcher and as a teacher educator. I'd like to highlight this practitioner research and teacher educator part of my professional life, personal professional life. Anna especially asked me to illustrate the work that we do within exploratory practice, which is this modality of practitioner research that we have been conducting in Brazil in the context of Brazilian universities, private and public sector, university and public sector schools. The intention of exploratory practice in general is to encourage practitioners to collectively engage in the work for understanding the local issues, what concerns them, by integrating research into pedagogy or other professional activities. And I will try to pinpoint some of the challenges, the ethical challenges that have been involved in this work. So I sort of thought that I could divide this talk into three parts. Part one, in which I will present how I understand practitioner research, right? Not only me, but as a professional stance. How I view teacher education, mainly in our context specifically, but I believe in other parts of the world too, for social transformation as a path towards social transformation. And within these ideas, the ethical, personal, professional issues, which within the paradigm, let's say, of exploratory practice, it's our focus on understanding life at work, life at home, life in general, and I will talk a little bit about this later on. In part two, sorry, I will illustrate some Brazilian work done by Brazilian practitioners to understand the quality of the lives. We have recently been expanding this notion, which was originally quality of life in the singular, but in order to highlight the fact that there's not only one quality of life in general, because this term is a bit commercialized and marketized, and so on, we want to stay a bit away from it. By putting it in the plural in recent work and discussions in our group, we came to the agreement that it would be interesting to mention it in the plural in order to emphasize the plurality, the diversity. And the third part, I don't know how many questions or whether we will have time. I hope so. I would like to think of our question and answer time as a time for exploratory conversation. I don't expect me to answer your questions, but we could maybe have a more interactional conversation, really. So how do I see, or what have people said about practitioner research. The first thing that, at least within All Right 2008 and many of our research, we see that practitioner research has been proposed as a way of acknowledging burnout, which is a syndrome, as some people call it in Brazil, that has taken, as All Right was overtaking teaching quality as a professional concern, right? And this burnout in 2008, Dick already noticed that it is not the result of teachers not coping because technically incompetent, but burnout, he saw it as a life quality issue, as an issue of quality of life, not teaching quality. Part of this comes, I believe, that when we were involving teachers in our Brazilian context and learners, but first initially teachers, to think about what they wanted to reflect on, they would choose what we ended up calling life issues. The technical issues, professional issues, rarely came up. What they came up with were issues of, why do I feel unfair about it? It was really ethical. It was the beginning of this, of the ethical issues coming up, which we named quality of life, as opposed to quality of work in some sense. I mean, this could take us a whole term. I'm not going into that at all. But practitioner research is in our context, and I believe in the UK system also, it's sometimes offered or imposed as a way out of burnout, as a way of helping teachers, instructors, professors to overcome burnout. It comes as an institution. And what I'd like to say, aligned with Cochrane, Smith, and Lytle, is that we should work out ourselves as professionals out of the institutional imposition, and think of practitioner research mostly as a movement, not as a trend, not as a discrete method. We really become very worried in Brazil. Some of my students have said this very often. When they see exploratory practice as being interpreted as another teaching method, they say, oh, that's not it. You know, it's it's about reflecting and investigating what you do as a practitioner together with learners. I'll get to that. So now, practitioner research, if you understand it from a more from this perspective proposed by Cochrane, Smith, and Lytle, it does overturn, or it has the power of overturning, of realigning, as they say, the relationships. Yeah, go ahead. The relationships, practitioners' relationship towards the brokers of knowledge and power, not only in school, but also in our universities. Okay, so it has to do with the construction of knowledge and the way power works out in the workplace. So, to explain a bit what exploratory practice, what we mean by exploratory practice, or how we see exploratory practice as a form of practitioner research, I would say that already Dick, All Right, and myself, we have written a bit about how exploratory practice seemed to us, even then in 2012, as a potential antidote for this, for professional burnout. Yeah, and later on, with my work with future teachers, and I've also proposed that that future teachers need to become as aware and as critically sensitive to the issues of social transformation and ethics, because it is my view that if we only wait for the moments of continuing education, once they're graduated, once they finish their teacher education, it's too late. So for me, the earlier, the better. To start in future initial teacher education already. And of course, because within exploratory practice we involve learners, we believe that learners are also being included in this movement as future professionals, whatever they become, whatever profession they choose. So as in the foreword to Asia Slimani's and Kylie's book, All Right says that sustains that educational practitioner research can be seen as a special case of practitioner research, inviting a new approach to the relationship, again, between researchers and researched, and being an approach which also invites a reconsideration of what and who such research is for, right? Because the biggest investment, I believe, in practitioner research is that, as opposed to, let's say, other kinds of academic research, I mean, I've been working and fighting over these years to integrate practitioner research and academic research as much as possible, because as we know, academic research is not necessarily for those who are being researched, and also it keeps the focus a bit distant into academia, you know, going into the libraries and getting degrees, but not necessarily working with or affecting the people who become involved in the research. And that was one of the main planks of exploratory practice as a form of practitioner research, that saying that it involves the people, and everybody gets the benefits of engaging in it. So that's why we state that it's a form of inclusive and ethical practitioner research, which offers opportunities for teachers, learners, everybody in the institution can become involved, as many other action research projects have done in Australia with Ann Burns and other people elsewhere. But exploratory practice brings different perspectives. It's focused on understanding rather than on solving problems, understanding local issues, local puzzles as we call them, rather than solving them, and working with a set of principles. So that's why it's principled, and it's integrated into the regular pedagogic or professional practices. Regarding language teacher education or education in general, I would like to say, along with a colleague and famous applied linguist in Brazil, that it is possible to reinvent life in in educational contexts and ways of producing knowledge. We believe it is possible. It is also necessary to consider teachers, along with All Right 2006, teachers, learners, or other practitioners for that matter, as knowledge makers in the field. So this equilibrium of knowledge making should be regarded or reconsidered very strongly. It is central for teachers to think of themselves as practitioners of learning with their learners. That's a big point in exploratory practice. That the inclusivity happens when it's about teachers with learners, but it could be with colleagues and other people involved. Along with Freire, of course, and Hooks, this is Freire. It's not Freire, Freire's daughter, and with Hooks, Bell Hooks, who was highly influenced by Paulo Freire. We believe in exploratory practice, and that it is urgent to fight for social transformation at teacher education level as soon as possible. And I love this quote by All Right, again in 2006, saying that teaching learning needs to be and become stimulating for the long-term mental health of humanity. This has rarely been said that way, put that way. And the mental health of the language teacher, which has a lot to do with a burnout issue, for the sake of encouraging people to understand that we are lifelong learners. The other evening with Asia, we were talking about how important it is for learners at any level to feel and to understand that the teacher also could understand him or herself as a learner, because that's probably the best way in which you see that we're all in the process of learning, and not the teacher teaching and students and only the students learning. I'm trying to keep up to this distinction between students and learners, because we want to highlight that teachers, we want to see, and we see teachers as learners too. About personal professional ethics, I would claim that the ethical perspective on all of this is this focus on working to understand human issues as respect, trust, care, rapport, responsibility, honesty, affect, reciprocity, resistance, confrontation, all the human issues we could think of as characteristics of what we have very, very synthetically called at the very beginning quality of life, but which we are now proposing as qualities of the lives of the people who are involved in these contexts, okay? In the context of teaching and learning, of teacher education, of academic research, I'll show examples of that, which are experienced by learners, teachers, coordinators, staff members, among others, all right? In 2006 seems to have been a very wild year for exploratory practice. Simon Gieve and I edited a book and wrote a chapter in which we tried to explain what quality of classroom life meant. And at the time, we thought that it wasn't anything that could be decided from the outside by external standards, but it was really internal to the group, the people who are living in the classroom. What teachers and learners understand about the nature, not the good or the bad quality, but the nature of the life they're living, the climate, the ethos, whatever is going on among the people in that context is what quality of life or qualities of lives of those people engaged, yeah? And that is more important than how productive or how efficient classroom. I know that these ideas are not very popular for governments or for institutional policies, because basically I think they're afraid of giving groups, individual groups, the power to understand, you know, to acknowledge that they understand what's going on. So going into part 2 to illustrate a few of the, I mean, these are just a few examples of the many work, you know, a lot of work that has been done within these ideas of exploratory practice. I would highlight the 3 of them here, these 3. One was actually, she was here in the UK presenting at some point, where she, Carolina Souza, she still is a psychologist of the school. I want to show you how it's not only about teachers and learners, but about professionals in school contexts. So she's a psychologist of the school, and she proposed to work with the other teachers collectively, collaboratively, to understand all these affective suffering at school, which was going on even then. Right now, I can't tell you with COVID and everything, how her work has been valued and demanded even more. Beatriz Maciel managed to write a wonderful PhD when she, but my point is that these, when they become academic research PhDs, for example, or MAs or any kind of monograph, they come from practitioner research. They are originally practitioner research, and they are then organized or written as academic research if the person wishes to get a degree, right? So it's what I'm calling this integration or this cross, I don't know how to call it, I can't remember the term, for saying that academic research can be based on practitioner research. To me, and I think for most of the people, Adriana, myself, Dick at the time when he was still supervising, the important thing was to have the practitioner research going. And the academic research, although we are in the academic context, is like a good benefit, an additional benefit, yeah? So Beatriz was interested in reconsidering her own professional life and see what she as a teacher could learn or was already learning from her students. And she realized, you know, there was a richness there that she could hardly describe. And she was the one, it was with her that we came to this qualities of the lives idea. The third point I'm making there, highlighting here, is the work, again, the collaborative and collective writing, which is another of the characteristics that we've been able to develop in Brazil, and not only in Brazil, also internationally, specifically with Judith and with Asia. and Bebel, who's in Brazil, writing collectively about the ideas of exploratory practice. And this is a wonderful, actually, too. We wrote it in Portuguese first, and then we had it translated into English. It's online. I can let you have the reference if you're interested. And it, in a way, it tells the story of exploratory practice in the past 20 plus years. When we did, and we conduct exploratory practice in the initial or continuing language education, we have some interesting examples too, among all the others, which I think there's no time to go into. It might be boring to, to explain each one of them. This one, Evo's here, Clarissa, worked on working with another teacher who was also becoming a researcher. So Midia was this girl who was becoming a researcher, and Clarissa was working with her to follow the development of this novice researcher. So in this case, what I'd like to highlight is the integration among the people, as in the previous cases where it was colleagues or learners with a teacher and so on. In Juan's example, here's Juan Nunes Silva. I think it's a brilliant example of how a teacher can integrate his work in this case. Juan is a man. How he worked with his students to understand about the affect that was being built, constructed in that group, beliefs and roles in the EFL classroom. So he proposed what we call a pedagogic activity, a potentially exploitable pedagogic activity, the famous PIPAs, right? To try to understand what's going on. And the important point for us is that when students become engaged in that sort of thinking and talking about what's going on in the classroom, many of the issues come up and are discussed. And as Dick would say, they're not problems to be solved, that sometimes they get dissolved, because by speaking about them, many of these relational, interpersonal issues are eased or become easier to handle. Larissa Santos, who will finish or is finishing her monograph and will be reviewed by Bebel next week, I encouraged her, and she found the courage to write her whole monograph on her own, right? I mean, so it's exploratory practice solo. She didn't do it with anybody else. It was about how she was suffering, and she suffered horrible harassment, professional harassment in her schoolwork during COVID. So much so that she was extremely burnt out and depressed. And by writing, she is slowly, little by little, coming out of it. In these pictures, which some of you might recognize, especially the people in Brazil, we have to begin with here, Decor, right, in 2003, with some of the exploratory practice members of the group. This is what our annual events look like, full of posters, messy sometimes, but a lot of work, a lot of life when students are there. This is Adriana's poster up here. I have to teach about the future.
Hello? Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. You are, no. People. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mute all. Okay. And mute. Yeah. Mute. Okay. So now it's here. Okay.
Can you still hear me? I mean, you can. Okay. So, all right. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about this one. Well, these are posters, right? Because our events, when we hold our annual event, they are basically based on posters that students and teachers bring to the event. Anna was there, right? In the winter with ILA 2017. And Adriana, for example, was going to teach, had to teach a unit about the future. The pictures looked very boring. And then she closed the book and said, okay, let's talk about the future. Obviously, in terms of grammar, what she needed to practice was the future tense and WH questions about the future. So she asked them, let's think about the future and see what questions you have. And they wrote, I'm describing this so that at some point when we get to the question and answer conversation, so that if you empathize with something you'd like to ask more questions about or make any comments. So they wrote these wonderful thoughts about themselves in the future, life in the future, school in the future, death. Then they went into other issues, themselves in family in the future. Will I marry? Will I get this fantastic death? Life in general, I think. School in the future. There's other wonderful work there carried out with Valeshka, who's one of the members of the Exploratory Practice group, and future teachers. This is another governmental grant projects that we run, where the future teachers noticed that the kids were calling each other terrible names, you know, very nicknames they had. So they decided to conduct this exploratory practice work in order for themselves and for the students to discuss this, what was going on. And they wrote on these bits of paper, which are very, we think, very organic, very artistic, very plastic in that sense. They wrote, first of all, they wrote the nicknames, and then they organized them into groups, into themes. And it was initially integrated with, you see there the tree, they were talking about the family, members of the family, etc., until they got to the nicknames that people use in their families, that in each individual family. And then this got organized into, it was expanded into all this work. And they categorized it as offensive nicknames, as cute, because they agreed some were cute, and the other one were funny. But the most important thing I find the most significant thing is that at some point they said, well, these categories do not always hold true. Some may be funny, but offensive, or funny and cute. And so they discovered many things. It was very interesting from a knowledge-making perspective. That one over there with the uniforms is fascinating, and we were just discussing it the other day again with postgraduate students. Is the political, the power issues that were going on there, because the kids in that school were terribly unhappy about the fact that their uniforms were orange, which is the same color that the municipality of Rio de Janeiro chosen for the garbage men. So they said, when they talked to each other, interviewed each other, they said, yeah, we are in the public sector school, you know, poor people, poverty, inequality, etc. We are considered trash. We are just as the garbage people. And they chose the color they wanted. And interestingly enough, that became the color, you know, for some reason this fortunately happened, and orange is no longer the color of the municipal schools, but it went blue, which is great. This is one, I mean, many of these we've taken even to Japan, I remember, and to the UK here in Leeds. This is very, very interesting because koala has a double meaning in Portuguese. It could be glue, or it could be cheating, you know, when you cheat. And they had a very troublesome situation at school that week. And when it was Halloween, I believe, and the teacher has her copybook and went to the board to write the specific terms, you know, for Halloween that you're going to have here. And as she's doing like this, you know, she was copying from her copybook some of the superstitions and things she could never remember. A student said, why can a teacher cheat and we can't? You know, and it was great. And this whole thing that you see that it's translated into English, because at some point in some year, I don't remember, I took it to Leeds, and it was very interesting to see the discussion. This one over there, that one over there, the green one, is one that Babel and myself, Marie Isabel, and me did 30 years ago, right, Babel? 30 years ago, the first time we ran a real teacher education course for public sector schools in Rio. And we were already experimenting with ideas that we didn't even know would become eventually exploratory practice. So that it's a very significant poster for us. Oh, okay, maybe I should go back to this one, which was the result of a workshop. We have workshops in our event. And this is a rucksack that the students created. But what it says there is, why should we educate in the 21st century? Yeah, it was already 21st century. So raising this issue. And this is the last of the sequence of illustrations where I'd like to highlight different perspectives, how some of these practitioner researchers were concerned, chose to work like Christiane with the notion of understanding, how Sabine tried to subvert the whole genre of a PhD dissertation, subverting academic knowledge, you know, the hierarchies of knowledge production. In Diego's case, who just finished 2022, and this is about respect of different people's narratives, and how in academic research those, I mean, I know yesterday you had a lecture, a talk on narratives, and how in some of our theses and MAs and PhDs, if you are into narratives and studying narratives and studies, we sometimes sort of led into bringing all the narratives into one form of analysis, or, you know, forcing categories onto various narratives. He asked 6 colleagues to tell him narratives about exploratory practice, and they each told their narratives in a different way. And he eventually figured out that he wanted to respect each of those narratives, and he analyzed each of them in a different way. And I think that is another aspect, another perspective towards respect within academic research. Not only respect for yourself as a researcher, but also for the people that researched, right? They were respected ethically, and he used this knowledge of ecology of knowledge to ground his decision. Emanuele is working on the sustainability of the Rio de Janeiro Exploratory Practice Group, and she's found out, among other many things, that there's not one sustainability as a concept, but also beginning to find different sustainabilities. So if she had interviewed us here, she might get different answers for, you know, different motivations for that group. And at the beginning, we might have thought that you would find something more common, you know, more commonalities. So again, it's respect for the people you're researching with, not on, and how you handle what they tell you. Delma's, a lot has been written and discussed about the autoethnographic perspective or journey that exploratory practice leads you in, because you are developing this yourself as a practitioner research with others with whom you share. So it ends up being an not only ethnographic, but autoethnographic. It's reflexive. I'm very proud to mention here, just to show that there's work outside the pedagogic context. André, who's working with the narratives of teenager interracial adoptions. He's adopted a child, a teenager, and he's doing again an ethnographic study about adoption of teenagers, which is not very common in Brazil, but also because they're teenagers, late adoption, and Black. So it's a whole very complex setup. And last but not least, Beatrice, who's been working with life stories, life histories of forced migrants. Yeah, and she's looking at it from an exploratory and a decolonial perspective, in the sense that she's working with migrants for them to understand with her the data. I mean, I don't want to call it data, but these conversations that she recorded and transcribed, and they're both working on, and she's being quite strong on taking this decolonial perspective. So when she had her qualifying exam recently, and somebody said, well, how decolonial been in your research yourself? And she's now asking to research about Nigeria, which is where these people come from, to research with her, because she says, if I only look at the authors I can have access to, I'm not being decolonial enough. You see what I mean? So it's trying to carry and to take decoloniality into everyday practice. So for part 3 now, I don't know how I'm doing for time. It's about time. I would like you to, for us, since we're not a big group, if you'd like to engage maybe in some sort of conversation, let's not necessarily call it question and answer, but you can raise issues. And I don't know if it's possible for the people who are online to also ask questions.
Okay. Okay.
So if you'd like to talk to each other, I mean,
Okay.
those who are sitting by, or
Goodbye.
if people have individual questions that I will.
So they can now speak, yes? Or okay, you have to
Unmute yourself.
Or if you want to write in the chat box. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, Bebel, can you hear us? Yeah, Dave?
Yeah, perfect. Okay,
Okay.
so
if you feel like asking a question, you have to unmute yourselves, okay? So I don't know where to look at now, but in any case. You would like a question? Yeah. Just a second. The microphone is going up for it.
Wonderful presentation first. Thank you. Yeah. It's not really a question, more like an experience.
A comment, right?
Yeah,
Good.
like a comment from an experience. Yeah, because I understand what you mean by the exploratory practice, integration of research, learning, and teaching. There was a scenario not too long ago where it occurred. There's a lecturer who was emphasizing on failing if you don't study for it, and it's kind of I don't know if it's strike fear in some of the students. And I've taken some courses on positive psychology, and I understood that it was a negative impact. Yeah, so I had to approach this lecturer, and had a discussion with him. What if he changes his approach? I mean, I understand that depending on the student, some with different personality might, emphasize on failure and can cause the student to subconsciously withdraw from out of fear from engaging the exam with their full potential. So I just told him, what if you be a bit more positive in terms of relating with the student? I don't know if this has anything to do with.
Oh yes, of course. So what happened? How did the lecturer react?
Well, the response I got was that if he decided to change his approach,
right,
it might be leading the students in the wrong direction, making them think the exam is simple. It could be difficult.
Yeah. That I would empathize with that reaction because at least to me, I would interpret it as some sort of fear to lose control of the situation. Because when you do this sort of thing, when you involve others, you can never be sure exactly what's going to happen, right? Or what themes or what concerns or what issues people, your other colleagues or your other. So that's why I think if we go back to one of the previous slides, which I won't do, I said that it upsets or it subverts, it messes up with knowledge production and the relationship among the people that are in this group. Because if you as a teacher think that you are in control, or you want to remain in control, which I think is what you're trying to say, that the lecture didn't open up for a more open discussion, then that's it. So you think you're in control. That's the problem, is that we're never in control. And but we are, sometimes we are, the institution force us to do that. Yeah, we're not always free to do as we wish in terms of controlling, of pretending to control. So in some, even in my institution, and Babel had also a similar experience, when you encourage students to really ask about their own issues and concerns and so on, the institution starts to worry about what's going to happen. Too many questions, they say. We don't have all the answers, and that's the point, right? That's what we want, is for people to become lifelong learners and interested in doing, and not just receiving this knowledge in packages which they can't unpack or discuss. Yeah, great for your contribution. Anybody else would have any? Yes, go ahead.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So your presentation, because I was, part of a lecture that the lecturer, keeps on saying that students are going to fail. If they don't do this, you're going to fail. If you don't do that, just like what he said. And then some students are like, we don't even understand what you're teaching us.
That's terrible.
Give us more information. Some students in our subgroup just feel so frustrated that the lecturers, the teachers are not putting themselves in their own situation, seeing things in their own perspectives. Because the lecturer would just tell you, do this, go find it out yourself, and not give you the resource, give you in-depth. Some of them just, say that uni is scam. They don't want to be here because it looks so frustrating. So I feel that if some lecturers be part of, presentations like this, listen, and also get to learn, get to know the approach they, approach the students, it will go a long way.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Again, as I say, it's an issue. I don't know if people online can hear the questions. I think they can. Yes. She was saying how learners say that they don't even understand what you're talking about, right? And when the students can, and we have many examples in our context about teachers not feeling confident enough to ask the teacher, even to repeat. I mean, and I have grandchildren. I know what my grandchildren tell me. And they say, well, here she goes, writing things on the board or putting slides. But we're not allowed to ask what we really would like to know more about, or if you simply didn't understand something. This old thing about that Nick is probably thinking about from Safia Churchill's thesis, right? I don't ask questions because I feel everybody else knows the answer. It's the feeling that we generally have in conferences and classrooms where you feel you're the only one who didn't understand, because there's no place or room for exchanging, for really talking about what is going on. How exploratory practice, and Dick, who's here or there, in Norwich, could probably expand on this, how important it is to allow time in the curriculum, in your classroom, and for us as language teachers, I don't know about you, but when you're teaching language, anything that happens in a classroom is language or can be language practice. Doesn't have to be what the book says you have to work on, right? But that again takes us into an issue of control and what needs to be done by a certain date, by a certain time, but when the test comes and so on. Okay, so another question.
Well, just a comment too. That was a good presentation. I comment that. I think as a follow-up to our comment, you made a statement that we remain learners.
Right.
They need to learn. I have been on the job as well for a few decades.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask me, what do? I tell you, I'm a student. That is based on that's your statement, because to be a good teacher, you have to learn. You must keep on learning so that you have something to teach. Now, in the aspect of science education,
yes,
not most science lecturers, now I'm using the word lecturers, are trained to be teachers. So the issue of pedagogy and delivery doesn't really bother them. And that is what she's trying to say. If you don't do this, you will not pass my course. If you don't do this, they have not been taken through the way to pamper, the way to deliver, and let the students understand. So like the other guy said, that some students even fail the course before they start.
mm-hmm.
So this is the importance of this kind of lecture. You have taken your time to do your research on the ethics, delivery, pedagogy, and all those. So it is now important for the outcome of your research to be put to practice by this category of people. Okay, you've done a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We always stress, because most of us in the Exploratory Practice group are language teachers. We think that it's all about, that in a language classroom, we could allow ourselves and encourage students to do these, let's say, potentially exploitable activities, because we believe, but we have had teachers, very few, unfortunately, from other areas like geography or history or mathematics at some point. But when you come from the sciences, and if you don't see your teacher as an investigator, as a person who's also learning with and science with your learner, of course, you always know more. That's what you were hired for. You're supposed to be at a different level. But that doesn't refrain you from, it's not pretending that they are learning, that you're allowing them to conduct the learning, but it's really opening space for them to focus on what interests them. And then I think it's our job to systematize that, because the misinterpretation of this is of this sort of thinking is, okay, you go into the classroom and you say, okay, what would you like to study? What would you like to learn? That's misinterpreting this altogether, right? So it's creating this learning atmosphere in the classroom where not only the teacher is the one who teaches, but there's this joint venture, if you like. There's another comment from, I feel sorry I don't know your names, but I think maybe.
Maybe I'll start by introducing myself so you can know my name. My
name?
name is NY.
NY. MY.
Pronounced air and wine. The air we breathe in and the wine we drink. Yeah, NY.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Nigerian. Yeah.
I see.
So
Nigerian.
this might cut across as a suggestion or a question, but I think a well-being course should be integrated into maybe not the primary institutions, but maybe tertiary institutions. A well-being course in the first year for students, for generally students all around from most departments to take part in, and maybe a teacher development program as well for lecturers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, this is, I'm not from here, but this is for the institution to consider. I think CPD along these lines is a very interesting project, you know, along the line. I mean, Anna, as a matter of fact, has participated in one at the Regent's University with Asia Slimani Rose initiative, right? To encourage these 6 or 7, I mean, there were more, but 6 or 7 that participated in the book, where they tell their stories and wrote their narratives about how they engaged in this sort of work, including learners in the learning process. Yeah, because we still, unfortunately, think, not we, but I mean in general, there seems to be from governmental institutions and policymakers a focus on product, you know, what people have learned, the checklist, and what, you know, all these things. And although they try to insert socio-emotional issues and all these things, it still becomes, when it's at an abstract level, you read it and you say, yeah, okay, that's good. But what happens in the classroom? How does that get done? In the classroom, I don't mean only school level, but university level, the lectures that you're participating in. And it's a very, I think, very important. It's about life. We're spending, if you think of how many hours we spend, not only as teachers, but as students in class or in pedagogical contexts, we should take more care of this, right? And that's where the ethics come. It's respecting the learner, respecting even the knowledge producers. Yeah, yeah, of course.
I just want to point out in Edgenstrom finished was pointing out to the contradiction of our
Engström, yeah.
Finnish.
Can't hear you, Anna.
Ah, sorry.
Can't
The
hear
Finnish
you.
system is considered one of the best. So what it says that all the contradiction that we have in our classes, in our educational system, is about, no, they are generated by the fact that in classroom, we should learn about life.
Mm.
But actually life is just rejected, it's put outside. You were saying about well-being. Huh? The thing that here we have a lot of emphasis, there is a lot of emphasis and stress on well-being. Yeah, there's an office, well-being officer, there is a lot of help for students, but this is, you know, this is well-being, or what you say, the singular of quality of life, because there is an idea of sustainability, one idea of well-being, whereas life and education as well is complex. It's so complex that things and emotions and issues can be only dealt in the complexity of the relationship, of the local situation of the classroom. And that's why I think exploratory practice, or working with exploratory practice, is powerful, because it helps you to see things. So this is what my understanding from my inquiry, to see things in the classroom with people in front of you to not see.
Yeah.
So even when you say about your lectures, maybe they are not aware of that. You see, that's why thinking in terms of inquiring about the relationships in the classroom might help your lecture. So I would not demonize your lecture. They simply are not aware. So they, you know, it's easier. It's easier having one version of things. Yes.
Yes, it's
as
easier.
you were saying, Inés, it's easier, it's quick, it's fast, its product can be measured. Yeah, because, you know, this is a marketized society. Education is commodified, so it's easier, it's quick, it's fast. Whereas it's difficult, because if you start questioning your own way of teaching, I mean, it's uncomfortable. Like when you are in a therapy, a psychotherapy session, that exploratory practice is psychotherapy at all. But it's uncomfortable, so has to become part of an approach, and sometimes doesn't work. simply, yes, because I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes simply doesn't work. Sometimes, you know, the product way of teaching your perspective takes over because it's easier. You don't have time to really think and listen to, you know, what's going on in this classroom. Yeah. So, and what you should be, so as all practitioner research modalities or version, a stance.
Right.
So should be a way of being, which, you know, you don't have to expect any outcomes. You try, you get involved, and sometimes you fail, sometimes you get, like it happened to me, some kind of epiphanies.
Right.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is my.
No, of course, I empathize with everything you said. And you touched on these very important things that if you allow for something, you know, you go into the well-being spirit, but you still think that you're going to fix things or that you have the power to control or to if there's something uncomfortable going on, that you will be, you know, in charge, still in charge of managing all of these interpersonal issues or personal, again, you know, with relating to you or the subject or anything. So if we manage to stay away from this solving, right? You put it so nicely, but I mean, if we still think that we are going to solve situations, as you said, sometimes we fail. That's the problem. If you think you are into failure or success, then you still, we still need to work. But I think we need to work as groups because it can be very lonely to think of yourself as the only person in charge. Situation among human beings. I mean, how can you control that? How can you be in charge as a teacher? As a manager, as a coordinator, even as a psychologist? And you mentioned the therapeutic effect. We have a colleague, Isolina, who always says that exploratory practice has therapeutic effects because if we believe in, but if therapy is understood as a way of curing, then it's not exploratory practice because we don't believe that we can cure anything or anybody, right? So we're not psychology, you know, it turns out, I don't want Babel is laughing here because we have this thing about, we sometimes feel that people approach or take a similar approach, but still with the intention of curing, of solving, of resolving, of, I don't know, producing something, but it's about it's not about letting go, but it's about being, right? I had another of Dick's PhD students, Jean Giroux, who said exploratory practice is a way of being in the classroom. Oh, you know, when you engage in this sort of ideas, it's a way of being, of living in the class. It's a way of life. It's not. So that's why I would like to. Right, yeah. But no, life is there, Anna.
But
you're not
seeing life
right
in the classroom.
because we're blinded. We're blinded by the curriculum, by the institution, by your own beliefs sometimes.
Yes.
And by students' beliefs, and in some context by parents' beliefs. You know, the pay for the institution who take the children to school also have. I feel you two want to say something, but not ready yet. No. Yes. I'm being the teacher here, or not?
Thank you. My name is Alyssa, and so I sort of see this very much from the early years context in like the UK education system and the school that I worked at. We did continuous provision, so it was very much student and teacher on the same level. We worked together on a lot of things. We followed their individual interests, and you really saw the identity development of the students rather than I'm a pupil. They became teachers. So they helped us label all the resources into different languages. They would help us with new resources. When we had a new teaching method like Q articulation brought in, we were learning it just with them. And they really appreciate seeing the learning staff sometimes help. And I think the students being able to see that failure is okay, learning from that and seeing their teachers not as these you know, high bodies up there. It's just the same as them, always learning
Right.
things on their level. So yeah, for me, that's where this sort of has resonated.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Where was this? Where, in the UK?
Yeah, in the UK. Yeah.
I see. Great. Yeah, I'm glad to know that.
Inés,
These lines. Yes.
Inés, in connection to what you were
Yes, go ahead.
First, Inés, it's always wonderful to witness again firsthand your relentless efforts and work and enthusiasm, you know, working on EP. So that doesn't seem to relax at all, which is wonderful. In connection to what you were saying earlier with, or Anna was saying earlier with you, it seems to me that when one is involved with the principles of exploratory practice in the classroom, it makes one alert to what is going on in the classroom, and you know, in reaction, it does also make the students alert to what is going on in the classroom. It's kind of contagious. So it isn't a way of trying to control or to solve issues, but it's natural, that is, you are aware about certain difficulties or discomfort that you want to try to alleviate them with, you know, having gotten some understanding from the students and from what is going on in general. So it is, you know, in a way natural that one would want to alleviate, just, you know, for the comfort of everybody, to move on with the class.
Right.
I don't find that this is in any way, you know, making it more difficult for the teacher. On the contrary, it facilitates, because as you are moving along, you know, the communication system is opening up. People are talking to each other and dampening or lowering the lack of understanding that might be there. Am I making sense?
I think so. I would thank you very much for your comment. I would say that when we engage in this sort of way of being in the classroom, we are recognizing, first of all, that we are human, right?
Yeah.
So we generate humanity, or more humanity. Of course, humanity was there, but it was, as you say, we were blinded, or we may not see it, or be dehumanized by institutions, or by curricula, or by books, or by anything.
Yeah, the classroom situations just livens up, and you have everybody concentrating and trying to contribute and to help maintain that level of attention, which I find fantastic, and that is what the teachers I worked with started to report to me after they got used and they understood what EP was about.
Yeah. The other thing, the other point you made, Asya, which I very much agree with, is this fact that it becomes contagious. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awareness, or this understanding that there's space to address issues that are concerning a group. You know, when you feel another, instead of having this fear of asking questions, so when these aspects get discussed, and I'm looking at Adriana here, who works with emotions, when you accept the fact that emotions are there, that affect is present in everything we do, in all our human interaction, I think addressing this, but without trying to stop or to fix,
that's right.
You know, or to cure whatever can be. I don't know if Adriana wants to say something. I have this terrible habit of putting people on the spot and saying, Adriana, would you like to say something? You're next, Dick. I'm going to ask you.
It's me. Do you want me to say something about emotions?
About emotions? We can spend all.
Oh my God, that's it. So in 2 minutes, it's going to be really hard for me. No, something that I believe that we've been doing. I mean, actually, I believe that exploratory practice has always been working with emotions, but something that we've been trying to enhance now is our understanding that we cannot avoid working with emotions. See, and we've been discussing not only among, members of the Exploratory Practice group and with our students at university, but also in the classroom, teachers and students. And we've been discussing about emotions quite often, and I would say always, but I don't want to generalize and never do it. But emotions has been something. Emotions have been something that we've been orienting our understandings nowadays. I believe that not only in Brazil, not only in Rio, but worldwide. So we've been facing different times, the pandemic times, and something that we've been trying to discuss about the world is bringing up emotions and trying to make sense of them or not making sense of them, because sometimes we cannot make sense of them. So that's it, briefly. I don't know if I said something. What I said is what you would like me to say, Inés. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are just approaching the end of the evening, so
I think Dick is getting ready to say something.
Okay.
I think so. You need to unmute yourself, Dick.
Okay, that's done. There's lots of things to say, obviously. First of all, thank you. It's the old cliche is you make an old man very happy. It's 30 years since we started this, and it's great to see so much happening still. But what I want is something about working for understanding without trying to fix things. It looks as if, from the early days, if a teacher showed he or she was interested in understanding what was happening to the learners as well as to themselves, then the learners themselves be very cheered up by that. They'd never known anybody apparently slightest bit interested in what was happening to them. So it immediately started a change in the relationship between the teachers and the learners. The most striking anecdote I remember from that for me was saying that she'd had a standard sort of class in Rio of young children and had the normal sort of relationship with them, but when she started doing exploratory practice with them, she found the relationship changed, and the obvious example to her was that she was used to meeting her students in the street, very poor students, and she would, if they were doing something that might be humiliating, like looking for something in a garbage can in case there was anything helpful there, she would normally go to the other side of the street and try not to humiliate anybody by letting them see that she had seen. But after she'd been using exploratory practice with them for a while, she realized they were just saying hello to her and she would say hello to them, and she was accepted just as another person that you could have a human relationship with. And that to me was extremely powerful, and that happened in very early days of the work we were doing. The thing I'd like to say, though, which is much older thought, Jean-Jacques Rousseau tried to put across the idea that waste time, not save time, is the golden rule of education. And I think there's something for us here in the idea that people may think we waste time by messing about with trying to understand things instead of getting on with them. And what Rousseau was doing, I think, was saying, no, you may think you're wasting your time. Other people certainly may think you're wasting your time, but do waste it in the way that you need in order to understand what's going on. But if you spend your time trying to save time, like your government may want, by simply being more technically efficient as a teacher, then you will have wasted far more time. So it's a complicated notion, I think, but it's one well worth thinking about. And just waste time, not save time, is the golden rule of education. And thank you again, Inés, for a fantastic, such a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making these comments. And thank you for keeping the connection with us. We're constantly working together, right?
My pleasure.
For understanding. That's good.
Okay, so we've reached the end of the event. Thank you, the live audience, and thank you to the online audience. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Inés. Bye-bye. Bye, hi,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.